ready to get underway and unveiling Shelby GT by Barrett-Jackson. Moving straight ahead.
Are we ready, Megan?
We're missing a couple from Scottsdale, but I don't know if I haven't heard from them. I might see it.
Good morning. Welcome to Barrett-Jackson on this historic day. Anybody that's been at one of the Shelby events is going to know the first question I'm going to ask. Is anybody having a good time at Barrett-Jackson this morning? That is what Barrett-Jackson has become, a great time in the desert. And we are very fortunate to be here for a very historic event, a family reunion, I guess you could say. Because this was an endeavor started by two families, the Jacksons and the Barretts, in 1971. And over the last almost 50 years, it has become an annual pilgrimage for friends and family to come and enjoy this wonderful hobby and to share our passion for the collector car hobby. It has become a place where people come together for historic moments like today. And this is a reunion because you're going to see a couple of Shelby family cars reunited today along with some new members of the family. Now first I'd like to introduce a few of our VIPs. We have some fantastic speakers today. We have, and please hold your applause to the end, Craig Jackson, Steve Davis, Aaron Shelby, and Jim Owens are going to do the presentations today. In addition, we have some phenomenal VIPs. Now first I'd like to tell you, look to your right and look to your left because the VIPs are everywhere. We're studded, but I'm going to note just a couple of extra. Carolyn Jackson, we're very lucky to have Carolyn here today. Jim Marietta and Tim Sutton from the original Venice crew. In fact, they helped work on some of the very first Shelby cars. We encourage you to talk to them today. We have Cash Singh from Ford Motor Company. Thank you, Cash, for being here. And Gail Sandoval from JDRF, who works with Ford Motor Company. Thank you for being here. We have also a group of executives from Shell Pennzoil, who are one of our phenomenal sponsors, and we're thankful to have them. Now again, today is a very historic moment. You're going to hear from some phenomenal speakers, and we're going to do something kind of fun today. We're going to have a photo spot at the end, and then we're going to start up. We're going to do our own Cackle Fest. We're actually going to start up these phenomenal cars. I think we have about 2,600 horsepower that we're going to start up here at the end. So again, my name is Scott Black. I'm part of the media relations team. If you want to talk to Craig or Steve or Jim Owens or Aaron Shelby at the end, we'll be glad to help facilitate. We have a whole team of media relations people here to help facilitate those interviews. So come chat with us. We're going to take some photos at the end, and we're going to be able to answer your questions. With that, I'd like to introduce the man, the driving force behind Barrett-Jackson and behind this historic moment, Craig Jackson, Chairman and CEO of Barrett-Jackson Auction.
Thank you very much. So I get called an auctioneer all the time. I run an auction company. This is what I love to do, cars. I grew up restoring them. I grew up loving them. I grew up around the classics, but I grew up with a brother who was 14 years older who grew up in the midst of this. And through him, I met a lot of great people. Carol was one of them. So I'm honored to be the custodian of these cars. It's a fantastic pair of cars. This is a historic day. Uniting these two cars, as much research as we have done, we have never found a picture of the two of these together. But we have found some amazing things in the Ford archives. I'm going to talk about this throughout the theme. We are doing 2 one-hour documentaries, one on each car. We have 75 hours of interviews, interviewing people that were very involved, in fact, the person that built this car. And how we found everybody using crowdsourcing, using the internet, using modern technology, old-fashioned detective work and a lot of legwork, talking to the historians, the people that keep the registers, Dave Matthews, Vinny Liska, who shared what they have, and then Jason Billups here and myself spending hours on the phone. You would think we have a Homeland board at home with all the yarn going everywhere, trying to tie all this together as we tried to figure out the history. And what we figured out is both these cars kept evolving, and that's part of what the intrigue is. Who I really want to thank, Jeff Catlin, who went along with me over here when we bought Little Red, Shell Pennzoil, who jumped on to fund the documentaries because they thought this history was so important and shouldn't be lost. Steve Davis, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, who sold me the Hornet. Al Rogers, who's over here, who has documented every single inch of both of these cars, trust me. Brian Stiles, I want to thank him because when I bought the 66 Shelby GT350 convertible and I went to see the 67, which is known as 139, he told me that I should restore the Hornet and told me to contact Jason Billups. He also told me to get a hold of Pete Disher about getting the Connelly working again. And that really re-energized me into the car. When I first bought the Hornet, Steve told me, don't drive it, you'll break the rear end. I drove the car and what? I broke the rear end 3 times. So I am consistent, and that's because it was not the right rear end. And to that fact, I want to also thank Paul Newitt. Now, Paul Newitt wrote the first book on the California Special, which Little Red is what the California Special came from. And then after finding the Green Hornet, he had to rewrite his book. Now after finding Little Red, he has to rewrite his book yet again, but he has been a member of the team. He has written a 47-page timeline working with all of us on every piece we found and how does that tie into all the different timelines. And these 2 cars are pretty interesting. This car started life as a prototype of a nationwide version of the California Special painted lime gold, and then it was in its second life turned into this, the Green Hornet. It went through, as we think, probably 3 lives, because at first it was a lime gold GT-SC for the nationwide version of a Super Coupe, and then they put the Shelby nose on it, and then they painted it lime gold again, and we know that from all the paint samples, which will answer some of these questions, but I'm also going to leave some intrigue for the documentary as I go through this, because we found some amazing things. Both cars talked to us as we tore them apart. Even though the Hornet had already been restored, we are lucky they didn't over-restore it, they didn't strip everything, they didn't take a lot of the originality out, and it's amazing how much it still told us as we restored it. Very special car, the Hornet. It has a CJX block in it. It was the first multi-port computerized fuel injection ever put on a Shelby. And independent rear suspension, a lot of different things. But I want to turn it over to Steve for a minute and have him talk a little bit about how he got it, how it came to here, and then we'll show you a quick trailer on it. Steve, come on up. Or you want to come on up?
So, little detour here. I apologize, Steve, but we would like to introduce Aaron Shelby. Aaron is grandson of Carroll Shelby and also board member of Carroll Shelby International and co-president of the Carroll Shelby Foundation. And he has a unique perspective on this car. Aaron, would you like to step up and talk a little bit?
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Carol and Craig, Steve, appreciate you having me here tonight or today. It's really quite an honor to be here to see these 2 cars come together, the 2 EXPs. It's a unique time when you can get these two historic cars that Craig and Steve have spent so much time putting back together, and then we've got the contemporary cars on the outside that Ford's producing today, just showing that lineage of how these cars fit together. As you all know, Carroll was quite a bit of a maverick. He really liked to do things his own way, but he was also fiercely competitive. And after they came back from winning Le Mans, and he came back here and started working on what was going to be the next Mustang models, this is kind of what was being worked on at that point in time. Obviously it didn't come to full fruition, but we didn't know what was going to happen at that point. So it's exciting to see these here today. It was really exciting when Craig said that they had found Little Red, and actually really close to where I live. I'm out of Dallas, so this was down around Weatherford, so south of Fort Worth. And to know that it had been in my backyard basically for 30 years and I didn't know anything about it was kind of interesting. But as I think Carroll said at one point, it's probably sitting in a field somewhere, and that's where it was. You know, this is it was a special time to see. We did the unveiling at the Henry Ford Museum up in Detroit in Dearborn about a year and a half ago, roughly. And to now see what's going to happen here at the end is something neat. And I'm honored to be here. And I'll let Craig continue a little bit more about the history on these. Steve's going to come up and talk a little bit about his history with Shelby as well. So, Steve, go ahead. And I, again, thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions later.
I don't know if one of these was meant for me, but I'm going to steal it for a second. I'm in auction mode, so I'm like a deep sea diver coming up for the first time and get into the environments. I'll tell you what an honor it is for me, and to be a part of Barrett-Jackson, to be a part of the enthusiast base, first and foremost for me. I come at this from a completely different place. As a kid, I only dreamed about Shelby. I dreamed about the models, the Hot Wheels, and one day potentially, man, what would it be like to own a car like that? And back in that time, back in the era of when these cars were new, of course I couldn't even drive at that point, but just something about the cars were magic. And as things evolved in my life, coming from where I came from, the Shelby always was for me an escape. It was something that I created in my mind when I wanted to have that moment of fantasy to kind of ground myself in whatever our situation was at that time growing up. That was my escape, Shelby. I remember I had the catalog, the Shelby Parts Accessory catalog. I wore it out as a kid. I'd go through it. I couldn't buy the car, but I could buy this key fob, or I could buy a lot of those things I still have today. Those catalogs are still just, you can see them where they're all wore out from turning the pages. So as things evolved, never stopped dreaming and thinking about cars, particularly the Mustangs, the Fords, the Shelbys. Love them all, especially in this environment. Chevy, GM, Chrysler, Mopars, they're all fantastic. There's just something magic to me about the Shelbys. Fast forwarding to actually buying my first Shelby, briefly. I'm driving down 198 freeway in California, and I see a GT500, a 67 red GT500 on a U-Haul trailer towing a Brittany blue GT350 supercharged car. I chased that car forever. Make a long story short, I finally ended up putting a second mortgage in our house. Came to my wife Janie. Said, I found the car. I finally won. The only problem is we have to mortgage our house to do it. She said, 2 thumbs up. Let's go for it. That car still lives and breathes with us today. And again, it's a 67 supercharged car. Ironically, a cousin to the cars that we're talking about today from a technology standpoint. But anyway, fast forward, I got into the car business after the finance business, law enforcement, and finally said, to heck with it, I'm going to love of my life is cars, I'm going to get into the car business. Ran into a lot of great people along the way. Was one of the best customers at Barrett-Jackson. Actually, when I came to Barrett-Jackson for the first time in 1979, I had a truckload of Mustangs. I came in, selling them all no reserve. People said, this guy's from Mars. Nobody sells cars no reserve. But the Shelbys, the Mustangs, the Barrett-Jackson, all these things collided for me in this amazing way. Many, many years into my career as a car guy, I heard about this car always, the green Hornet. And I'm thinking, God, what an incredible car. And there really wasn't a whole lot to be found about the car, because this is before really the magic was realized by everyone. The magazine articles, Martin Mueller, the gentleman who owned the car before, I got to know. Make a long story short, the circumstances were created that I was actually able to buy the car. And buying that car was for me an incredible moment. and it went into a very, very special collection. It lived there for a long time, and I had, it'll always be a very, very special place in my heart for this car because of what it represents for me, for Barrett-Jackson, now for Craig, and for humanity when this story is finally told. But what an amazing journey it was for me to be standing here, and it's an honor. And thank you, Craig, thank you, Carolyn, thank you, all of you folks for being here, because this is a story worth telling. This is not just a couple of cars. This isn't just a cool story with an end product that everybody goes, wow, that's cool, it's one of this, it's one of that. This, to me, embodies the legacy of what is and was Carroll Shelby. The DNA that lives and breathes right here is alive and well right there on the end of this little grouping right here. Every car that rolls across the auction block at Barrett-Jackson that has that Shelby logo or the blue oval, when you think about the performance components and the aspect of what it is that drives Ford performance and the heritage, this is it. It doesn't get any better than this. These cars literally tell the story of Ford, Shelby, the Maverick that Carroll Shelby was, the innovations, the ideas that he had, which were so far beyond the normal production mindset. And especially with the movie out, Ford v Ferrari right now, you see a little bit of that. But again, that's the important thing. The world is going to realize what these cars really are, and it's going to intensify. For the future to be the future in a way that allows these cars to keep moving forward, you have to appreciate what this is. Craig and his team, they did an incredible job figuring out exactly what these were, because they're really urban legends, both of these cars. Especially Little Red, because when they found Green Hornet, they said, well, that is, maybe it isn't, maybe it is, and there was all types of stories. You know, Mr. Newitt did a great book, and probably at that time was the most knowledgeable person in the world. I was an enthusiast and a guy that studied this stuff and a historian in my own right. And then when Craig picked up the ball and started running with it and hooked up with Jason to restore the car and all the people on his team, it really started to unfold in this unbelievable way. And here today, we're manifesting all that past into what will be the future. And the way this story gets told really will be the catalyst. It will be the horsepower that pushes this beyond this core group of enthusiasts. I know, Carol, I'm getting it, don't worry. Bottom line, folks, I could go on forever. I don't have an off switch, as anybody that knows me understands that, but I am passionate about this. It's real. As Craig said, I think it's important. They see us on the auction block and they see us running around and doing all these things, but first and foremost, we are car guys. We love this stuff. We know what it takes to be a part of this in a way that allows us to affect other people in a positive way. We're inoculated with the same needle. There's just no cure for it. We have to do this because it's something that drives us. And for Craig to pick up the pieces of what was this fragmented story with his team and put it together, it's a story worth telling. For me, the Green Hornet will always be the #1 car forever. Now the urban legend coming to life. There really is a Green Hornet, and now there really is a Little Red. And this was lightning in a bottle once. That's phenomenal odds. Lightning in a bottle twice, forget about it. I could go on, great to be here. I am honored. I think each and every one of you, especially the journalists in the crowd, to be able to tell this story and really tell it in a way that gets to the bottom of what drives this car, literally and figuratively, what drives the hobby, what drives the passion to allow Barrett-Jackson to be the poster child for why these cars are important and why they will continue to be important and why we will be the only place in the world where the manufacturers, the hobbyists, the enthusiasts, the media to come together and see this. Only at Barrett-Jackson, prime time all the time. You were part of it. God bless America. I'm proud to be here.
All right, we're gonna do a mic switch here. Much better. All right, well, now I wanted to direct your attention to the screen here. So we started the documentary with the Hornet because here's the basic timeline. Already owned the Hornet, started restoring it. 2 years ago this weekend, Jason came here with his trailer, picked up the Hornet. At the other end of the polo field, we did a goodbye shot. We stood there like we did in my garage when I first introduced Steve and Jason together when I first had him look at the Hornet. What do you think you could do with it? And we said both those times, wouldn't it be cool if we could find Little Red? Well, in the middle of restoring this car, we found this car. Well, let's play the trailer for the first documentary, which is now going to be the second documentary since we found Little Red. We're actually going to do them in order now. Cue the video.
The DNA that now lives and breathes in all these modern cars, it all began right here.
It's an amazing journey of researching these cars.
I know people are going to be shocked when we roll the cover off.
Bringing this thing back to life has been a real treat.
Finding something like this and bringing history back out is just so exciting.
I can't think of one person that's got more influence in the collector car world than Craig Jackson.
Amazing amount of detective work. And this is interesting. Here is when Carroll said to build the Hornet.
Well, the Green Hornet was groundbreaking for the time.
We know this is the rear end that went in it.
This is quite a find. I mean, to go on the original car to have an original piece.
This is the way it was on the car. To see it this color, it's going to be a little bit of a shock.
What's next?
It was all experimental.
Kind of like electronic fuel injection.
That's the EXP part of it. We're going to try this, we're going to try that.
Independent rear suspension.
Those are the kind of things that make this car so special.
They threw a lot of stuff at this car.
Everything is as accurate as it can be.
This is truly a piece of history.
This is the way the car looked originally. Just the attention to detail on the car, seeing it sit the way it should, it's sinister. As you can see, I drive them.
I don't think I've ever enjoyed watching somebody do burnout so much. It's great.
Well, that's just a little teaser. So the Green Hornet lives again. It runs, it drives. As I said, there's quite a few people I need to thank. And as you saw in the video, the son of the gentleman that designed and built the Connelly fuel injection put it back on the car. Jim Marietta, who is here, and he was the gentleman that I got the original set of rear end parts built back in the day by Ford Advanced Vehicles. Now think about that, the journey these things went, hearing the journey of how they were taken to home in a Moody, how they ended up in a peach orchard, and then how they ended up back on the car is quite a story. Ralph Arnings, he gave us the original set of blueprints that his dad drew of the IRS in the Hornet, and then also having the original set of blueprints. Now this stuff is all on the boards behind the Hornet. It's Dwayne Carling also, he was one of the guys that helped chase down all these parts without doing all this. And then Jason, he found some amazing one-off parts to put back on the Hornet, experimental parts. It has all of its original parts. During the restoration, we figured out, and we are glad, as I said earlier, they did not strip all the parts, and we found the original paint underneath, and BASF matched it exactly. It took maybe 100 tries going back and forth to get it perfect, but it is the exact color. It is still the original interior in that car. So I know we're here to talk about this car, but these two cars really are so similar in so many different ways, but it all started with this car here. So the story of Little Red is quite interesting. So we found the car, as Aaron said earlier, in North Texas. In the documentary, we're going to go into a lot more of how we found it, just a lot of the story about it. But it is a very cool car. It is the father of the California Special. Lee Gray and Lee Iacocca saw the car in LA, shipped it to Dearborn, and the Deuce liked it so much, he said, let's build those. That's why they're so tied together, because this is the nationwide version that was proposed. Both these cars everybody knew were crushed. Now we know they weren't. It's an interesting story that we're going to talk about, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later, but now we know virtually none of them were crushed. And that was all an accounting decision. I want to thank everybody that helped us get into Ford Archives, Edsel, getting in there and following, as Brian Stiles told me, follow the accounting and it will lead to things. Getting the accounting and the inventory sheets led us to the trails, but also lets us know these cars had multiple lives while they were still there back in Dearborn and Iona. And they kept being evolved as they went along. But with that, I want to play the trailer for Little Red, and then we're going to unveil it. So one more video here real quick. This is one of those rare days when you pull that car out of the middle of nowhere that everybody thinks doesn't exist, and you change history.
Well, Little Red was the first. For years, decades, it's been accepted this car was crushed. Everybody just believed it. The fact that they found it, and it was out there. The guy wasn't disguising it, wasn't in hiding. I think it's incredible.
This has been a special time. As we started doing all this research, we started tying parts of it together.
Anytime you can find something that has this kind of history, and you've got somebody as passionate as Craig Jackson who wants to help restore it and do it right, it just continues Carroll's legacy and the Shelby legacy.
The Shelby DNA and the excitement of that era is what that car historically represents. In my opinion, it's priceless.
The genius in that team and the do anything spirit they had.
So now what we're trying to do is get as much information on it throughout its life.
That's original Apple Red right there.
If we can go and make history right, that's what we're doing. The only way to rewrite history is to have the actual item in your hand. Here's your prototype drawing for the one that's on Little Red.
They painted them, they changed them until they had what they needed.
It was a test bed to see how much horsepower a Mustang platform could take.
Whenever we light this thing up, we're getting ready to bring back to life the most powerful vintage Shelby engine ever built.
This goes back to that era when cars were at their peak for horsepower performance.
You gotta love the fact that they kept shoving horsepower at the thing and just having fun with it.
Bringing the engine back to life, that's the heart of the car.
That's a piece of history coming back to life.
Fire in the hole.
Well, before we unveil it, I want to say one thing. I know, and the documentary will talk more about it, as this car went through its life. We restored the Hornet to the way it ended life. We restored Little Red to the way it started. When we found Little Red, it was in '68 trim, and it had a ton of prototype parts on it. So there is another Little Red to be built. We are going to build another one with all the prototype parts. That'll finish the story. But this is Little Red. Jason? Now, a gentleman that's sitting in the front row here, we found on the internet. First his son said it's crushed, then his dad looked at the picture and goes, oh, that's Little Red. So he gave me this picture, and that's what we built it back to. Never seen before. It'll be in the documentary, but that's what we put it back to. This is the car exactly. So it started life. Carroll ordered it right after he came back from Lamont, as Aaron said. He put the big blocks in the GT40s, won Lamont, came back and built this car. Jason, you want to help me pop the hood pins? And he wanted to build a car to go beat Ferrari on the street also. So this is his Ferrari killer. So has 2 superchargers, and ironically, when we dynoed it, you know, a lot of stuff that was written, part of it was right, part of it was wrong. The hard part is remembering between all the different cars what was done to what car, and the car talked to us a lot as we went through it, same as the Hornet did. Little things like, what were those 2 holes for? What was the hole for in the firewall? What was the other hole for in the firewall? When we put the car together, you realize that's where the pressure gauge and the fuel gauge went through the firewall for the gauges that are in the car. As the car evolved, this is the first car we believe that had the louvered hood to cool it because it overheated. That's something Fred Goodell said. It was probably the first car to get the outboard headlights because it overheated. And it, every time we went, the things that were still on the car and the holes that were in different places, as we put the car back together, stuff just fit right in. It was absolutely amazing. So even though it was sitting in a field, it was in pretty good shape and had good bones on it, and Jason did a fantastic job. So as you can see, it is EXP 500. All the pictures of it at Riverside, it was GT 500. That was, as we think, probably its 3rd iteration. So it kept evolving as history went on. This was Carol and Fred Goodell's favorite driver. There's several stories about Fred Goodell drag racing this car. There's a lot of stories about it being loaned to journalists and people out driving it, and it's amazing that it still lives today. And the DNA I want to talk about here, because next we're going to have Jim Owens come up and talk, because this story didn't end. So last year at the auction, when the Hornet was unveiled here, we were selling GT the rights to buy VIN number 1 to the next GT 500. And I'll talk about a little bit more in the documentary, but I made a decision up on the auction block, actually, when Edsel was describing it. I turned to Steve, I go, "You think I should bid on it?" And he goes, "Absolutely." So I went down there and hadn't pre-told my wife, but I went down and told Carolyn, "I think I'm gonna bid on this car." And I ended up buying that car. And the reason was a couple things. One, it's a great charity. Together with Ford, we've raised $6.8 million auctioning off their cars for JDRF. But I wanted to have the car that everything between this car and this car are now in that car. And I think Jim Owens is going to come up here and talk a little bit about that and the history that came from these 2 special vehicles. And then when we're all done, I'll answer some questions if you guys have some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. For those of you who have not met before, I'm Jim Owens. I've had a pleasure to work with the entire Barrett-Jackson team for going on now, 17, 18 years. And I want to say thank you first on behalf of Ford Motor Company to not only Carolyn and Craig Jackson, Steve Davis, and the entire Barrett-Jackson team. When we're up there at Ford Motor Company, and we are producing the cars and trucks as the most trusted mobility company in the world, it's not about appliances that get you from point A to point B. And it is truly represented, Craig, Carolyn, Steve, by your team to carry that forward. The love and affection for these vehicles that get us out here on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. to talk about the heritage of the vehicles, that is because you guys have kept that going. And I want to say thank you on behalf of Ford Motor Company and all the Ford employees and the Ford family, because you guys are that keeper of the flame that carry it on to the next generation. Now, Craig had mentioned that we want to talk a little bit about the history of this. If you think about it,
This isn't about transportation. This is about families and loves of vehicles. If you think about it, these cars are, Steve, Craig, part of your family, right? And Aaron representing the Shelby family here. If you think about Klaus Arning, right, the original designer of the independent rear suspension system that's on there. His son Ralph worked for Ford for 35 years and finished his job in the Mustang assembly plant. You think of Edsel Ford, who as a teenager went to Le Mans, watched the win, and then he came back in the summer and did an internship working for Carroll Shelby. Lived with Carroll, and then Carroll actually made him wash transmission parts, which I think is a really cool story. But those families that carry on that passion is carried on by Craig, Steve, Carolyn, your team. And on behalf of the Ford family, we can't thank you enough. Now, on the charity aspect of it, you mentioned $6.8 million for charity. What Craig and the Barrett-Jackson team, Steve Davis, and every member of the Barrett-Jackson team does is create magical moments. These magical moments started in the '60s with the 2007 Shelby GT500. And that one we raised money for the Carroll Shelby Foundation at the time. Those are those magic moments, and they are represented by the 4 cars that you have here. Now, when I tell the story of it with Craig, I've been around Craig for 15 plus years. I told everybody at Ford and everybody I come across, this is the most animated I have ever seen him in regards to a vehicle. He gets excited. I mean, you can see it's not just because I'm cold here. You kind of get the goosebumps when he starts talking about the guy from Cadillac, and he flips open his picture and he grabs his iPhone and he starts showing the pictures. He and Edsel, when they were talking before the charity auction, before you graciously donated the money to JDRF, we were sitting in the back in the green room, and he had opened up his phone and started showing the pictures, and then the binder that you have. You opened up the binder and started showing them. That love and affection and that interest came through clearly. And through that leadership and that emotion translates to all the employees and all of the attendees here at Barrett-Jackson. So Craig, thank you for all that you've done to continue this enthusiasm for vehicles, so that, you know, in theory, my kids and my grandkids will still be able to enjoy these vehicles. Now, on this vehicle, the one over here, matching this one, is a great story. Why don't we run the video first, and then I'll tell the story, because it's just a lot of fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, congratulate Mr. Craig Jackson. He bought the car. $1,100,000. Thank you, Craig.
The day has come. The 2020 GT500 has finally arrived in Scottsdale. We were honored that Ford let us sell the first GT500. I was up on the auction block listening to Edsel Ford talk about what JDRF does. And we have raised $6.8 million to date. In the middle of making all the announcements, I turned to Steve Davis.
We're really excited about this car.
I think I'm going to bid on the car. I left the podium, went up front, didn't tell anybody, didn't even tell my wife, and I started bidding on this car. It's an amazing charity, and I also wanted this car to be with the original Hornet. This is the first car since the Hornet was built, a GT500, to have all the technology that was developed in this car in 1968, the independent rear suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, multi-port computerized fuel injection in a brand new GT500. This is VIN number 1. They took a car, body in white, off the assembly line. They painted it just the way this car was painted. And it is a very special car that was painted lime gold originally. And then this wild green candy apple color was put over it for Penske Resurgence. Painted this car lime gold, and then put the candy green over it, and as it went through the flat rock assembly plant, you could see all those areas that you could still see the lime gold under it. I gotta thank all the people that work at Flat Rock. They took great care of building this car. All the engineers and the entire team from Ford were there watching VIN number 1 car get built.
and it was truly an amazing experience. So it's been quite a journey. It's here in Scottsdale. We're going to have the Hornet back there again, an amazing display of GT 500s under a tent that is with Ford. So be there in Scottsdale this year. It's going to be one amazing show. See you soon.
So one of the things that makes me smile and laugh, if you saw the video when Craig was driving this one, and that serious face and that big huge smile, and then when he was driving the 2020 VIN 1, that carries over from the 67 all the way up to the 2020. So Craig and Carolyn and Steve and the entire team, we cannot thank you enough for carrying on this car culture. If you think about all of the technology, which was, the heydays of the muscle car era. A lot of people say the 60s were. I'd sit here and tell you that the heyday of the muscle car era is today. And you'll see the things that go across those stages. Some of our bow tie people who are sitting here behind us are going to have some cool stuff to go across. That availability of the men and women who developed those cars in the 60s is what is allowing us today from Ford Performance to deliver on their promise from back in the 60s, including 760 horsepower, fuel injected, supercharged, fully independent suspension. Just like these cars were back in the day, they finally came to fruition. And it's on behalf of Ford Motor Company that I'd like to thank you, Craig, Carolyn, Steve, and the entire Barrett-Jackson team for making these moments possible, so that when my grandkids are coming here for the 75th and 80th anniversary of the Barrett-Jackson auction, they will see these cars going across the stage. So Craig, thank you. Steve, Carolyn, thank you so much. And we can't wait to hear these things fire up.
Before we do that, I just want to say a couple more things, and then we're going to get in and actually start these cars. So, I am just the caretaker of these cars, as we all are. So as Jim said, hopefully these cars, and I may end up actually just putting them in a foundation so they never get sold. So that's my thought. I want these cars to stay together. This is a team here now. So you have two new ones that match the two original ones, the original EXP 500s. It's my honor to have these cars and to restore them and to share them with everybody. I see Kevin's in the back. He started this journey with us. Kevin, hopefully you and I come to terms of getting the last bit of paperwork for this car. This car was actually sold. So this car was sold to the guy that ran the lot for Ford from the employees. They took the fuel injection off of it, took the IRS out of it, and sold it as a used car. This car was sold with 5 other cars in a group in Colorado. And we have interviewed in the documentary the original owner, the second owner, what they did with the cars, which is hilarious when you hear about it. And you ask him why he chose this car and what he did with this car the whole time he had it. And then it lived through all of this and is back here today. So we are going to probably put the 2 documentaries out about the end of March, working on the final details, but it'll be on a major TV network. Then we are going to build a bunch more webisodes that really go into the detail of how we did everything, how we found everything, all the in-depth interviews. And the other thing that was great was going to the Shelby reunion and talking to so many of the original employees. And Ralph, who we talked to at his memory of both of these cars was amazing. He filled in so many big gaps that we didn't know, that we suspected by the paperwork. But while these people are still around to ask them questions, we thought was important. I want to thank again Shell Pennzoil for funding the documentaries to document the history of these 4 cars, and the story is still yet to be told when we put out all this other data. But also, you know, we had thought, do we wait to unveil this until the documentary's done? We decided no. We wanted, in case this sparks anybody else that's out there that has any other pictures, any other documentation, we have a website, shelbyprototypes.com, and anybody can hit us there or on our Facebook page. And that has led to where we got a lot of the stuff that we already have, but also the Ford Archives, the people that run the registries. And I won't give it away, but we know exactly now why the last version of this was built and why this car was built the way it was, and that'll be the finale of the second story. Thank you. Now we're going to start them.
So gentlemen, if you can come and start your engines, can we drop the hood on this one for the photo? Anybody like to hear 2,600 horsepower startup? Oh, come on. Don't you want to hear 2,600 horsepower? If you are a member of the media, a news release with images are available at Barrett-Jackson.com. So go to that and we'll be glad to give you all the information. And then we're going to take a few photos after we start these 4 fantastic cars. Let's start with the car that started it all. Craig? Jason to come up. We're going to do a short Q&A. Afterwards, we're going to be able to take some photos. Now, I've got to remind you, these are some phenomenal cars, so please be respectful. Don't get too close to the cars. And if you're a member of the press, we'd love to chat with you afterwards, too. So, Craig, would you like to answer some questions?
Sure. Any questions? Yes.
Hey, Craig. How you doing?
Good.
Question. That car there is 427 twin superchargers.
No, it's 428 police interceptor with 2 superchargers.
Okay, is there any correlation between that car development time frame when Carroll Shelby did the 2 Cobras, the CSX 3015 and CSX 33 maybe?
The Bill Cosby car and Carroll's car. Yes, but we are not 100% certain now. Walter, who's sitting here, who put the superchargers on it, said that they did the same thing as the 2 Cobras, and that's why we knew they were inbound superchargers. Now, I'm not sure whether one of the Cobras is built, then this, then the other Cobra, because the timeline is pretty close. So there's little things we don't know of exact timing, but we do have some invoices that Dave Matthews gave us. So this engine was replaced on this car, and the regular cars, they charged them, what was it, Jason? $79 or something, and this one was $800 and some dollars. So we have a good idea that that's when they beefed it up, because I think it puked the first motor pretty quick. Yes? Well, I kept flying back there. I didn't restore it. Jason Billups restored it, but I kept flying back there for the key points. You know, the key points when we took it apart was really amazing because the car talked to us as we took it apart. We kept calling Paul Newitt and telling him we got to rewrite your book again because we kept finding more stuff as we took it apart that contradicted what was sort of urban myth. And then going there when we put it on the dyno was another real benchmark. And getting the horsepower reading that was exactly what Fred Goodell said it did. It was pretty amazing. So we knew we built the engine exactly the way it was originally. Yep, thank you.
Next question.
Any others?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a saying that a rising tide floats all boats, and I'm wondering what this will do to the whole Shelby market, the vintage Shelby market.
Well, I hope it re-energizes it. That's why I wanted to build the 2 cars out of the new cars. Now, this car is VIN 131, which was the Shelby number for this car. I don't think I ever noted that, and if you look at the back, it's got a Barrett-Jackson license plate 131. The correlation between the old cars and the new cars, as Jim Owens said, I think just raises the excitement of the old cars. This is the DNA that led to these new cars. Any other questions? That was pretty easy.
We'll do a couple quick photos if we can get you guys up here.
Thank you all for coming. Walter, you want to come up for a picture?
Why?
I want you in the picture.
Actually, good to be here, Walter.
Tim,
Yeah.
take a photo.
You're the man.
Get a picture, Tim.
Brian.
All right, guys. I know. He worked at Shelby America and Shelby Automotive the entire time.
Okay, looking right here at Brian.
All right, guys, everybody on 3 here. 1, 2, 3. Couple more, guys. Looking up here. All right.
I'm sorry.
I guess I'll do it again.
Sold in a lot of holes. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's back to life. Will you remember it? Here's the man that built Little Red. Brian, you taking photos still? Good. All right.
Sorry, I'm blocking you.
Yeah, you can go sit down, Walter. Thank you.
Let's get these guys in. All right. Here. Everybody turn right here.
You got looking right over here, Brian.
All right, guys, everybody looking at me here on the shot. 3, 1, 2, 3.
I don't want to play with it.
Pretty cool moment. Also, I never mentioned, and I meant to, Aaron Shelby has graciously said that he will help us do the voiceover for the documentary. I want to thank him for that also. This is a team effort. Ford, Shelby, all of us as a family.
It's awesome to see this come together.
We gotta do one.
That's cool.
All
Cool as that. How about that?
Let's go make money. Buy more cars. Thank you.
You have it, DanoLive.